How's it going, everyone? Yes, that's right. I am doing a live stream on my main channel. The reason being today is Australia's birthday. It is Australia Day, otherwise known as Australia Day 2019. I'm here with my usual host of Matty Rose Live, XYZ live streams, David Hiscox, the lead editor-in-chief of XYZ. How's it going, Dave?
Yeah, really good. Happy Australia Day, Matty.
Yeah.
Happy Australia Day, viewers, and happy birthday, Australia.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Happy 200 and
something or others. Yeah, 231.
231.
No, 21?
221.
41? Oh, whatever it is.
I think it's
31.
231. That's not bad.
Very old.
Yeah.
Getting old Australia.
Australia's still got pretty
good. It's actually quite young.
Yeah.
So we were down at the parade today. It was an eventful day. There are a few things to talk about with the actual parade itself.
We had a lot of fun.
And then we stuck around for the Invasion Day protest after, which was eventful as well. It was quite eventful. Very interesting to see what happened there.
It was nice to cool off, I've got to say that. Yeah. We'll explain that later.
Yeah, that was a few interesting things. A couple of run-ins with a few idiots, I guess. You just call them idiots.
Idiots.
Yeah.
Traitors.
Another way of saying it. So,
never a sign to malice what can easily be a sign to sheer stupidity. Yeah.
Pretty much. They don't like Australia Day, as you'll see on the vlog that I'm going to make. I didn't know how much content I was going to get when I first went into it, but got plenty, I think. Plenty to talk about in the vlog. Plenty of photos for tomorrow's headline. Tomorrow's headline, this is a XYZ live stream sort of preview. Like you guys, tomorrow's headline will be thousands of traitors march in Melbourne against Australia. Yeah. It's not dishonest. Yeah. Tell us where the lie is. I want to know where the lie is.
There's no lie. They're traitors.
But anyway, we'll start off with the parade itself. Yeah. It was an interesting parade. One thing I noticed was a distinct lack of pride in Australia. I mean, there was a few Australian flags, but there was a hell of a lot of multiculturalism.
Both in terms of the flags and the people, yes?
Both. This is an Australia Day flag, yet the Australia Day parade, I should say, yet the parade itself had a lot of flags from countries that weren't actually Australia. I'm just trying to work out why we've got non-Australian flags at an Australia Day parade.
Well, Australia isn't Australia. Australia is a collection of nations and a collection of people from those nations. And it's the logical consequence. It's the logical next step of civic nationalism. The idea that anybody can come to Australia and be Australian and share our values.
Yeah. They
don't have to share our identity or our ethnicity, even our flag. It's literally just a mishmash of people from everywhere, and they can just say, yeah, I physically exist in Australia, therefore I'm Australian. Yeah.
I didn't see it as really much of an Australia Day parade, to be honest. I thought,
what would you estimate was the proportion of real Australians at the Australia Day parade, the actual Australia Day parade?
Watching or in the parade?
In the parade.
I'd be surprised if it was better than 50-50.
Wow.
It was probably more, round about half, I should say, of Australians and non-Australians.
Well, I guess that kind of reflects the cultural makeup of Melbourne. So
yeah. One thing I did notice, which we should mention, is that the military were part of the parade, and they were definitely Australian.
Yeah, it's the ethno state.
that was Australian right there. The military was Australian.
Good,
but then they had a lot of.
Good to see how many people are in already.
Yeah. Welcome to the live stream, everyone. Hope you enjoy our Australia Day content. Feel free to ask us questions about certain things. It's a bit of an impromptu live stream. If you don't know what we usually do on the live streams, we do our normal live streams on my other channel, Matty Rose Live, every Monday at about 9:15 Australian Eastern Time, where we go through all the headlines of the week that we want to talk about, just discuss what we want to talk about. This is just going to be more about Australia Day, the parade today, and all that kind of thing. And we'll be taking questions from the audience if you want to have them. There are super chats there if you want to send some and help support the channel. We will endeavor to read every super chat. We might have to maybe amend them slightly because we know that there's some characters in our stream quite often.
Right,
so
yes.
we will endeavor to read them out as much as we possibly can. You have to understand that we are not on a...
There's one character in there whose initials are RF. He knows who he is. Okay, so yeah, the actual parade itself was basically multicultural.
It was a multicultural parade.
And not just like in terms of the people, but in terms of they weren't even trying to look Australian. They were trying to look like the people from where they came from.
Yeah, they were looking like their own country and their own nation.
Yeah.
And there were people obviously supporting the Australian country and the Australian flag and all that kind of thing. But this is an Australia Day parade. It should be 100% that. It's not. We're not. The only reason we're called a multicultural country is because our elites are basically trying to shove it down our throats.
Yes.
And this, to me, was more evidence of our elites trying to shove multiculturalism down our throats. I wasn't a big fan of it, to be honest. I really wasn't a fan of the parade. I didn't
feel
like
connected to it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I didn't feel like the parade represented me one bit. I think it was actually a bit of an insult to Australia Day, to be perfectly frank.
I got to say, I'd never been to an Australia Day parade.
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever been.
Because I've been to the Anzac Day a few times. But when Australia Day has been on, I generally just go to a barbecue and I don't take the parade so seriously. But now that it's under threat, I'm like that guy who sort of only visits when, you're in trouble. It's like, okay, well, let's go and take a look, see what's going on.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what to expect in that regard.
Well, I'd never been as well. I only went down because Neil Erickson set up a Facebook event for a number of people in the nationalist movement to just go and hang out and watch the parade and all that kind of thing.
I heard he got bashed 32 times by a bunch of Irishmen this morning, actually.
Yeah. He didn't turn up, actually. He never turned up.
Bashed 32 times by a bunch of Irishmen.
It was funny because Ricky T, who's Neil's mate, he was there. We sort of walked around looking for him just to see what he was doing. We didn't find him until sort of near the end of the parade. It was funny because a few of the guys were standing up at the top of the steps in Federation Square. And I've walked off to get some footage of the end of the parade. And then as I've walked back, I've noticed that there were a number of policemen around them. And I'm like, why are there police around here? This doesn't make any sense. And I walk up, and then up Ricky T walks. I'm like, oh, well, there we go. He's basically got his own police escort at this stage.
Mind you, they don't need the police for him.
Hey?
They don't need the police for him.
They don't, exactly. It's essentially a protection for him.
Yeah. Okay, so that sums up the actual Australia Day parade. It was what kind of float? Were there floats? Were there?
So, because you sort of arrived a little bit late, didn't you? It was more just a lot of people marching.
Yeah. And
I think there was a Greek group, and they were doing their Greek dance. And there was a Thai group, and they were doing banging the drum and all that kind of thing. Every cultural group, every ethnicity that had their own thing, and every actual other group, it wasn't just other ethnicities, there were different people within the Melbourne and Victorian community. There was even one group of people writing penny farthings right at the end, which is cool. Yeah,
that's actually kind of Aussie.
I got
right.
The end of the back of the parade had that. It was the front of the parade and the back of the parade were very Australian, but it was the middle, which was was a multicultural sandwich.
So what you're saying is Australia has a European facade, and in between is just
yeah.
So what you're saying as well, it sounds like a really boring version of Moomba.
I didn't find it at all that interesting, a parade. They just walked past, and there was some drums and some people carrying their own nation's flags and all that kind of thing. But where was the Australian pride? Where was the pride in our nation and all that kind of thing? Everyone seemed very proud of their own countries.
Yeah,
but not all that many people seem all that proud of Australian country and of Australian culture.
And that's
the Australian country.
That's the critique of multiculturalism. Lauren Southern actually summed it up really well, and keep repeating it. The thing about a multicultural country is that people come from different countries and they stay in their own communities, both physically and they also meet up and keep their culture and their language and their cuisine and everything alive. So multiculturalism, in the end, it actually reinforces ethno-nationalist reality, in that birds of a feather like to flock together. People like to be with their own people, and so that's what we're actually seeing in this parade.
Essentially, it was a lot of different ethnic groups marching together as their own ethnic group on an Australia Day.
So how about we get to the fun stuff then? And let's actually go to where all the white people actually were marching.
That's right.
And that was,
which is the full irony of the thing.
Yeah, we like the vast majority of the anti-Australia march. I'm not even going to say anti-Australia Day march. It was an anti-Australia march. The vast majority of those people were actually white people.
That's exactly right, and they are going to feature fairly prominently in my coming vlog. So me and Dave stayed back after the Australia Day parade. Well, Dave got there a little late, and Dave had the bright idea of going and getting a closer look at the protesters, the Invasion Day protesters. So we walked straight up Spencer Street. It was not Spencer, Swanson Street, sorry. Hate those little factual errors.
Like the old 19th,
like the old 19th and 18th century.
Off by one century.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, we got our first ever super chat.
Oh my god!
First ever super chat. Should I finish the story or should we answer?
No, let's just go straight to the super chat.
Let's have a look at it. Look, all right, we'll answer this one, and then I'll finish the story. But we'll answer this one right away. Katie and Danos, thank you very much for your $5. You are the official first ever super chat that I or Dave have ever received. So we do appreciate that. Very well done. The question is, what do you think of the fact that Tasmania is the whitest state in Australia?
Well, this actually kind of, we can answer that when we're talking about this parade. Because, gee, wow. Because it was the thing about this anti-Australia parade. The majority of people in the parade were white Australians, and it's kind of becoming a meme now. Whenever I get on like a live stream, I like to sort of imitate my drunk self when I went on the Unshackled a couple of months ago, and I just went, "This is why we need to talk about race. We need to talk about race and with white people." Because what you see marching down Burke Street and then Swanson Street is all these white people who hate themselves and hate themselves so much that they're saying, we don't own this country. This is not our country anymore. We're just going to give it all away. And
I didn't see them doing a lot of giving away, to be honest, though.
Oh, well, yeah, they're virtue signaling. They hope that they can hold on to their little bit of whatever they have. But they are giving away the country. Oh,
they want to. They're saying they want to.
And that's the problem with Tassie as well. It's all those types of people. It's why Tasmania doesn't have an economy. Tasmania is very lucky that it's such a beautiful place. I know I've heard that people have gone down to Tasmania, state, but then they find out it's basically Brunswick.
That's a big point that you actually bring out there, because what do I think of Tasmania being the whitest state? I think good for Tasmania, essentially. But as we noticed at the parade, or the Invasion Day parade, probably 90% of the people there were white, or maybe say like 80 to 90%, with the rest being probably half white, half Aboriginal. Mostly, it might have been a few others, obviously, but that's basically the majority of the people that were there. Which I noted this at the time. I found it quite sad. I felt sad for them. Mostly I felt sad for them, because ultimately what they are protesting is not Australia, but they're protesting white people. They're protesting themselves. They're showing that they really don't like who they are. They're ashamed of themselves. One of the signs I noticed was, it's okay to be ashamed.
Yeah,
It's actually my favourite sign of all of theirs because it sums up exactly their position.
That's going to be the big the heading photo for tomorrow's article.
And they are ashamed, and they think it's okay. I don't think it's okay to be ashamed. I think, well, you're allowed to be ashamed if you want to be, but I think it's quite sad that they're ashamed of their own culture. So what's happened? Do you want to add to that?
Well, yeah. So this is why I was saying a couple of weeks ago that I see the XYZ's, well, my role in the XYZ at the very least is to red pill white people on race, because this is a great example of how we've been brainwashed into supporting the agents of our own demise.
Just before we move on, Joseph Goebel Koch.
I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it.
I'm pretty sure it's Joseph Goebel Koch. Happy Australia Day, mates. I love your effing Antifa video, Matty, at the St Kilda rally. Really appreciate it, mate. Sent $20. Very much appreciated. We really do appreciate that support there and the kind words, obviously. Just quickly, we're going to introduce a friend of ours. Thank you for joining us, Australian Meditations. He's come. He was there at the Australia Day parade itself, and I believe he has a story to tell us about what happened after. We sort of lost.
It looks like he's wearing a blue singlet as well. That is
awesome.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, mate.
All right. G'day, everyone. I was at the Australia Day parade today, and I think it was pretty obvious what happened. And I think you've probably been through it already, but I'll tell you what happened afterwards. So me and some of the boys went to a pub. I'm not going to name which one, but it's pretty obvious if you look at the news which one it was. But we went to the upstairs area to have a few beers. And there were basically maybe 8 to 12 Aboriginal activists in the same area. So we were like literally a meter, 2 meters away from them. They were sitting on a table, and we were having our beers. They were having their beers. There was one guy who was like an Aboriginal elder, so to speak. He was like 60 years old. He had, graying hair, and he even had a stick, like an Aboriginal stick sort of thing. I don't know, some sort of cultural thing. One thing led to another. We didn't do anything. We were just there with our flags, and that obviously triggered these people. And they started shouting. One of them started singing an Aboriginal song. Really weird stuff. They were just very triggered by Australian flags.
Did you stand there and smile?
Yeah, I stood there and smiled. I'm like, mate, just relax. I'm having a beer. I didn't say anything. Some of the other people did who were with me, but we didn't start it. We were just literally going upstairs, and we just had a few beers. And then they started complaining, calling us all these names. Some of us started retaliating, but we didn't go there and cause a trouble. We were the first to instigate it. They were the ones who instigated it, and some of us were responding. And then it got to a point where this disgusting lady, who must have been in her 50s, one of the guys had a flag on his back, and another guy had a flag on a pole. I forgot which one she tried to burn, but people were smoking, so there was a smoking area. So some people had lighters. And this woman, she was a white woman, by the way, she's not even Aboriginal, typical, she started trying to burn the Australian flag, literally in front of me, and she basically lunged on the bottom of the flag and tried to light it with a lighter. Once I saw that, I intervened straight away, and I basically pushed her away. I didn't punch her or anything because, unfortunately, we have laws in this country and you get arrested for that sort of stuff, especially in a private establishment like a pub. But I did definitely push her away, and I confronted her about it. Nothing that could, get me in trouble, sort of thing. And she backed away. And then some of her friends came to support us, and it almost got out of hand. But I didn't complain to the manager, but the bartender was blaming us. He's like, "Oh, why did you guys come up with your flags? You treat, they were just having their beers and you came and caused trouble." I'm like, "Hang on, mate. Why are you telling us off? We just came upstairs, which is what we're allowed to do. We didn't say anything. We had our flags on, which is fair enough. It's a free country, but it's Australia Day especially. If it's not our fault, they started shouting at us first. And on top of that, don't you have a policy that basically says that you're not allowed to burn anything in a pub, in a private establishment? I'm pretty sure they got a law against that. And if anyone started burning anything, they would be kicked out. How come these Aboriginals, essentially got away with trying to burn the Australian flag? It didn't work out. They tried twice to do it, and I pushed them back both times. Luckily, it didn't get out of hand. But this is crazy stuff, and it's just really disgusting that we can't even go to a pub in 21st century Australia, and we can't even have a beer without being castigated by a bunch of radical Aboriginals. Okay, who on top of that try to burn the Australian flag. There was almost a punch on, but it didn't get to that stage. I think both sides realised that it wasn't worth it because no one wanted to be arrested. But just for the record, I just want to make sure that nothing was burned. I literally stopped that from happening. I'm not trying to, glorify myself, but when someone's trying to burn the flag in front of me, I get a reaction, and I literally just pushed her away. She went backwards a bit, and then after that, she said this. I said to her, "Oh, you try to burn the Australian flag again, you see what happens." I basically threatened her, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm proud to burn the Australian flag. I'm proud to burn the Australian flag." So it's just insane how on Australia Day people have the audacity to do that. And if we're up to me, there would be laws preventing flag burning. I don't want to say what kind of laws I would introduce because I think it's pretty obvious what I would do with these people. I might get into that. But apart from that, Maddie and David, something else happened. I don't know if you spoke about what happened with Gary and Ricky T. They both got arrested, I think. And Bluebeard lost his phone as well. I think someone stole his phone. So they didn't do anything. They just went to Flinders Street. I didn't get any footage of it, but the news tonight might show the footage because there was definitely media there. But essentially, from my understanding, Gary Hume and Ricky T were just walking with their flags, and then someone basically started shouting, "Get them!" Some Aboriginals started shouting, "Get them!" and they got attacked. They tried to steal Ricky T's flag. They couldn't achieve that, but they were kicking him in the head, I think it was, and on the body. So they basically assaulted two people, Gary and Ricky, and none of them got arrested from my understanding. It was just Gary and Ricky who got arrested, and they didn't do anything. They didn't provoke anyone. They didn't say anything, literally just walking past them, okay, and holding the flag. And even if they walked in the crowd, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They shouldn't be assaulted like that. I'm just really angry that the Victoria Police didn't arrest the right people. I mean, at the end of the day, assault is assault, and it was the Aboriginals who were assaulting the white people.
Did you get that on camera?
Unfortunately, I was at the pub when that happened, but I did see it, and from a distance. I was filming from a distance. I might upload the footage later.
Did anybody get the confrontation that you were in on camera?
Pardon?
Did anybody get the confrontation that you were in with the burning of the Australian flag?
No, I was thinking of filming, but then I didn't.
Wait, so did you say you weren't there, but you did get that? They were at the pub, or
I was at the pub. I was at the pub. Okay, but I didn't film anything because I just didn't. I wanted to, but at the same time, like at a pub, I don't know what their regulations are on filming.
It happens really quickly. We had a confrontation too, but I don't. Oh,
we'll talk about it in a second. Yeah. We've got a delightful super chat from Scott Rousel. Thanks. You said $50, so I think we got to read it out as much as we can here. Just how do we?
Okay, let me read this. Redacted. Enjoy your multicultural utopia on this very special and proudly diverse day. Brought to you by Redacted. Also, thank you for funding our ethno-state and border wall with your blood and money. Cheers again, Redacted.
Well done. Yeah. Well done. Now, if you want to read the entire super chat, it is there. It is there. Unfortunately, there are certain things we can't read out on this particular platform. We do appreciate it though, but because we do, redacted. Because redacted. And if you don't know why, well, you should have gone to Specsavers.
So just commenting on this is like I often talk about the fact that Australia, like we are told that in Australia the dominant culture is white Anglo culture. It's not. It's multiculturalism and it's cultural Marxism, and that's a great example of how it works. Like the police, if they are arresting the people who got attacked,
I think we should give the guy sent us actually before you go. The guy did send us $50, so we should probably say a little bit more.
Did a pretty good job.
Okay, should we say, because he did say the whole thing. The couple of, we'll mention the words that were redacted were Shalom Goys and what?
I did fine.
One's chosen and God's, not in that order. And go Yim. These were just the words. They're just the words that we redacted.
So yeah, and just the fact that, like in the pub, the bartender was taking the side of the Aboriginals, even though all you did was take in Australian flags on Australia Day.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about this country, that you guys are seen as the provocateurs? You guys have done nothing. They are the ones who have attacked you. But kind of, simply for like asserting your Australianness, you are seen as being the aggressors.
Yeah, and I'm just disgusted because it reminds me of the whole blasphemy laws of Islam. It's like, just because people can't help themselves, it's our fault. I mean, we literally, like, you know us, we're not going to go and cause a fuss for no reason. We just literally went there with our flags. They started having a go at us. Some of our guys responded. But at the end of the day, they're the ones who were reaching out, trying to, burn the flag, and I pushed someone away, which is my right to do. I mean, you're burning, our property, or you're trying to, sorry. But this is ridiculous, and it's a damn shame that this happened. And I'm more disappointed with the manager, who I spoke to kind of briefly, and the bartender. And I'm like, listen, don't you guys have rules? And the bartender blamed me. He's like, oh, you're the ones that came here with the flags. I'm like, mate, it's Australia Day. What the hell do you expect? Okay, a lot of people, had flags downstairs. Nothing happened then. Okay. And I said a few things, parting. We eventually left because we couldn't be bothered, and we just said Happy Civilization Day just to trigger a bit more, But I've had enough of these people, honestly. I've made a few videos on my channel, meditation videos about Australia Day and why we shouldn't apologise, because it's kind of like, no matter what we do, they'll never be satisfied. So why would you pay back a debt that is unpayable? Because no matter what you do, they'll just continue, wanting more and more. Give an inch, take a mile, sort of thing.
Well, that's exactly right. And this is what the guy, John Mark, speaks about on his channel. You've just got to say enough is enough. Nope, we will not apologise ever. We will not apologise for who we are, and we'll call out their lack of tolerance as often and as loudly as we possibly can. We had our own little incident where we were just standing there. So what happened is they marched up Swanson Street. I was going to talk about this before. So they were marching up Swanson Street, coming from Burke towards Flinders Street Station. If you don't live in Melbourne and you don't know where that is, go look at a map. Anyway, we'd walked from Federation Square up to Burke Street, just on the side of the road, because Dave had the bright idea of going and getting some up-close footage. And there were barriers there, and we figured they're just going to march through the barriers and we'll just be here on the side and we'll watch. We got to about Burke Street, and that's when we met the start of the protest. They sort of come around, and we started filming them. While I was filming them, there was a couple of people standing around watching it.
I was taking photos.
He was taking photos. And then what's happened is, rather than go around onto the road where they were supposed to go, a few people sort of filed onto the footpath. So we've got, just paint a picture, we got them coming down went to Swanson Street here, and then in there, and we're sort of stuck in the middle. So we were essentially surrounded by people who hate us for the color of our skin, and hate us because we love our country.
And we just happened to be standing next to a guy who had an Australian flag cape and an Australian flag hat,
who had a big mouth as well.
Australian flags.
Who was very antagonistic towards him as well. He didn't need to be that. I didn't want to say anything to him because it's like, well, he's got his right to speak.
If he hadn't been there, we may not have drawn attention to ourselves. Although I think they probably would have picked us.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I had some lady come up behind us and say, "Stop filming," and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Stop filming. It's a very sad day. It's a day of mourning," and I'm like, "What?" I just basically responded to her. You can have it you'll see it on the vlog. I'll probably put it up there. I'm like, I actually like today. That was my response. I actually like today. Thank you. I'm not going to stop filming just because they demand it. And then, sorry, what happened was Dave sort of walked off to get some footage over in another area. So I was going to walk over and meet him, and I had to sort of squeeze between two people. And as I was squeezing, this big bulky. I think he might have been a half Aboriginal. I'm not sure. He could.
They just looked white to me.
Yeah, he looked maybe even white Lebanese or like that sort of ethnicity. I wasn't 100% sure, but he's like put his arm right in my chest. Yeah, he's like put his arm right into my chest, and I'm like, hey man, what are you doing? I'm just walking through. Like, I had my camera. I'm like, I'm just walking through. I just go over there, mate, and he says, and they start yelling in my face, and one of them grabs my phone, and I've got it all on camera.
That's it. That's really.
It's just sad, like man. I'm like, what are you doing? I told one of them, don't touch my phone. Don't touch me. What are you doing? I'm just here filming. Yeah. I was literally just only filming. I was there to document the parade so that I could comment on it later. I made a few comments and all that kind of thing. And then we had the Stasi police following us around.
So, people from the parade, it's like they had these designated watches or something like this. And so there were these mostly girls, or one or two guys. They were in black shirts, literally black shirts, and they had red armbands. And so I got a few snaps of them. They literally looked like members of the National Socialist Party. And it's like they were trying to like stop us from taking photos or
Nazis.
Like, segregate us. Yeah, it was hilarious. So like when because I had no idea what was going on. I was taking photos, and then I turn around and I see the confrontation. And then you took your camera away off the guy, and then you come back. You had blood on your tooth. So
yeah, I think I got a whack in the face from the phone because he sort of pushed the phone into my face and stuff. It was good content.
Then two more girls came along, and they were talking like Barbies. They were like, "Oh my god, don't you know? Like today is like a really sad day, and you can't do this. Stop filming us." And there's a guy like standing back filming us as well. And then it was my favorite bit was that kind of died down. And so then we went sort of back to filming and taking photos, and then water gets sprayed on me, and I turn around and I see this little girl, well, not a little girl, but a girl sort of running away back, and then she hides behind this other guy like this. And she's like,
threw water on us. Another thing that was interesting as well is a couple of them had an Australian flag, and on it was "No Pride in Genocide." They basically defaced the flag, and they were following us around a little bit with their flag, all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to get some footage of them, but they were sort of. I filmed them, and they were sort of just in the shade, and I wanted to get some good footage. So I'm like, do you reckon you could just move over a little bit and get into the light? I'm like, thanks guys, and they did. Very, very nice of them to give me a nice picture.
Just one last thing. Sorry, just one last thing on our confrontation there, because it was interesting because we did find ourselves surrounded. Like we deliberately tried to stay off the path of the protest, and then we found ourselves surrounded. There were no cops to be seen. In the end, it's probably good that there were no cops because they were going to move on anyway because they like to do the in and then out, just like shock tactics. If there'd been police around, even though they were the aggressors, they may have come in and given us a hard time, like it sounds like with these other guys. So in the end, like I think it sounds like we got off pretty lightly.
Yeah. I just want to show you my shirt. So I was wearing this shirt today. If you don't love it, leave. I've got a few death stares on the train, like from people who were like wearing Aboriginal shirts. And on top of that, I even had a few Greek, I don't know if you saw, but there was a Greek contingent and a Muslim contingent and a Jewish contingent and an Asian contingent who were anti-racist, and they had their own people at the rally. And I had a few of the Greek ones who know me, because they know I'm a nationalist, not a communist. And they were following me around, and they were just taking photos. You had another guy called Ezekiel Ox. I don't know if you know Ezekiel Ox. He's a rapper sort of guy, anti-fascist rapper. He's a massive lefty and he's a fanatic. And he was taking photos of us at the pub. So we had a lot of lefties who were taking photos of us at the pub. And it was weird. And one good thing that we did was before, and I'll upload the footage later actually, before the rally actually started, we saw a bunch of boomers who were promoting refugees. They had a sign that said "A fair go for all," and they're promoting bringing refugees into Australia. And myself,
this one here.
Yeah, you got one. A souvenir. Yeah. Good on you. Yeah. But what happened was myself and Ricky T, we went and basically confronted them about it, and we explained to them, they get free housing, and a lot of them are terrorists and rapists and stuff like that. We basically gave the typical nationalist arguments. And one of them tried to take the same, "Oh, you can't film here, stop filming me, don't touch me." She started touching me. She started touching my hands to get the phone out of her face, and she came in front of me anyway. I didn't film her on purpose. she came in front of me and told me to stop filming. I'm like, it's a public place. I don't know what it is with these lefties. They just don't understand this idea of public place allowed to film. I don't know why they don't get that. You're allowed to film in public, for God's sake. And
it was a very sad day, you see, and they just didn't want us to film.
I just don't like the opportunism. I mean, you had Jehovah's Witnesses there promoting their propaganda. I'm Christian, but Jehovah's Witnesses I'm not a fan of because long story. But then you had
Christian.
Yeah, then you had refugee advocates, and then you had all different sorts of wackos who were just promoting their own thing. But what really annoyed me was the refugee stuff, and I think we need to send a message to these people. As long as you do it, nicely and all that kind of stuff. We didn't swear at them or anything, but we basically told them that this is the way it should be. You people are destroying the country. Your politics is destroying the country. And I just hate how these people they were all boomers. They were all 60-year-olds, and they might look all sweet and cuddly on the outside, but on the inside, these people are promoting policies that's destroying Australian culture and the Australian race, and we should be confronting these people at every opportunity.
I thought most of the people in the parade were millennials. They were middle-class white millennials. That's the vast majority of the people that were there telling us that it was always Aboriginal land and all that kind of thing. What we were discussing, what we talked about on the way out of there was they're so ashamed, but they're also so quick to get aggressive and right in your face, which is why it's such a crime against the Australian people that the police allow them to get away with it. Like you said, that Ricky T basically gets bashed and they arrest him. It's like, how does that work? How is that just? How is that not just escalating things to further conflict? This is what they do. They're always escalating to conflict. It's always like when I walk past, I was literally just walking past and they just started, pushing me and getting right in my face and going, do a bit, like with, in a bit of roid rage and all that kind of thing.
The soy rage.
The soy rage.
Yeah. And that's
so
the thing.
It was interesting to be right in the thick of it. Someone asked us, where is it? It's like, why don't you explain how you feel about the genocide happening in this country? Well, we don't like it. And I've actually spoken about it quite often. And this is why we want to close the border, because we're basically seeing the genocide of the white people in this country. We're being ethnically replaced, and it's ultimately going to end in a genocide, which is what happens when you ethnically replace people, as the globalists want to do here. And we aren't going to be, well, they're not going to treat us with the same amount of niceness and kitty gloves as we've treated the Aboriginal people, where we are now giving them billions of dollars a year in welfare and all that kind of thing. They're not going to do that. They're not going to feel guilty about bringing civilization or taking our civilization away the way we feel guilty about bringing civilization to this country. No, it's pure, actual, genuine genocide. So no, we don't feel happy about that, which is why we're working against it.
Do you know what's interesting is that I walked out of the pub a few times and I spoke to an old lady. She must have been 50-something. And she was obviously on their side, but she was one of the more moderate ones. She was not the kind of person that caused violence. And at the end of the day, she got pissed off and she left because she didn't like my argument. She couldn't rebut me. But this is how the conversation happened. Eventually, I said to her, I don't like how we apologized to them, but they didn't apologize to us. And she's like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, to think that in the frontier wars, they didn't commit any acts of, massacres against white people. That's ludicrous. Of course they did. Both sides did. And I just don't like how we're constantly reminded about the Mile Creek massacre and all the other massacres that white people committed, but we never mention all the other massacres that Aboriginals committed. And I just happened to do a video a few weeks ago about one of those massacres. It's called the Maria Massacre. It happened about 1840, I think it was, 1842, if I remember correctly, in South Australia. And basically it was a shipwreck. There were some, settlers who were shipwrecked in South Australia, and they had to go ashore, and basically they were massacred, women and children, men, by the Aboriginal tribe there. Eventually, they were found out, and the white men went and basically got their revenge. But the point is that women and children were massacred. And I literally, what I just told you right now, I told that woman, I literally told her, Maria Massacre, all that kind of stuff. And she goes, before I said that, she's like, oh, it was self-defense. And I'm like to her, oh, is self-defense killing women and children? And then she's like, oh, and she didn't know what to say. But it's funny when you explain history, okay, to these people, and I've done videos about the crimes that white people committed as well, because I think we should know that. But I mentioned that there's a context to it. It goes both ways, and often it was in response to something that they did, But I just don't like how it's a one-way street. I would have thought that reconciliation, understanding has to be a two-way thing. And if we're going to apologise, how come they didn't apologise for what they did?
You make some very good points there, and I would think that Aboriginal people here today would be strongly in support of closing our borders and stopping immigration for obvious reasons. So surely we can all agree on that and say, all right, let's close the borders and make Australia a white ethno state with an Aboriginal minority and just keep it like that. Where Aboriginal, I'm more than happy to give Aboriginals their own land where they can self-determine and all that kind of thing. I just don't want to have to pay for it. That's all. Yeah. I'm not against them self-determining, not at all. I think that I don't see why Aboriginals wouldn't come in with the nationalist movement on that regards.
Well, they're doing the Samson, aren't they? They are bringing the whole thing down on themselves. They're like, right, you guys came here and destroyed our culture. So
well, it's not. It's only the activists, and a lot of them are. It's just the activists, like you said, the inner city activists.
Yeah.
I would imagine that there are plenty of Aboriginal people who would be on our side in the nationalist movement if they really sat down and thought about it. If they were only on the fence, if they thought about it and they would come to see the reason and the logic behind our point, and it would be a lot better for their people if we just close the border and keep it that way.
Even for example, and you're absolutely right about that, and that has actually happened, Matty. So a few years ago, I'm sure you might be able to find it on Google still, but in Redfern, I think it was. Now, Redfern, I think, is a suburb in Sydney. It's got a high population of Aborigines. There were posters spotted in Redfern from Aboriginals, basically saying that they're against Asianisation. I think the posters had like a dragon on it. I think they were annoyed that a lot of Asians were migrating to Redfern or the surrounding suburbs. So, and I know some people who have contact with certain Aboriginal elders, and they tell me that some of these elders are actually sympathetic to our nationalist cause, and they want to be left alone. They want a treaty, for example. I disagree with that, but they basically realise that actually everything we cherish isn't really going to exist if we're learning Asian languages in schools, and the Asian culture is more dominant. And a lot of them feel like they're being overwhelmed by that. And it's just,
I don't think. Well, I would never see anyone of another race or ethnicity as my enemy just because they are of a different race.
Yeah.
The enemy are communists. And as we saw today, there are a large number of communists who just happen to be of white European descent. So it's the communism which is the number one enemy. And on the flip side of that, the way to combat their communism is to be a unapologetic ethnic nationalist, because that's completely what they're against. The fact that they happen to have European descent is irrelevant to me, because they don't like their own heritage. They're not proud of their own heritage, and it's almost like a lot of them are incapable of that. I don't think they're all completely gone. There are plenty of people who can maybe one day see the light. I think as we build momentum in the movement and tell people the truth and keep telling people what's actually going on, we'll get plenty of them coming over to our side. Someone mentioned in the stream just earlier that last year 70% supported keeping the date on the real Australia Day, the 26th, and this year it's 75%. It's a pretty big jump in a year.
Yeah.
And I can't see that going away anytime
it's
soon.
It's a public holiday. For 25 years, about 30 years we've had it as a celebration. It's a public holiday. It's an excuse for a barbecue. People also genuinely like the day because of what it represents as well. You don't have to work, all that kind of stuff. So also the parade as well. It's become a tradition. I mean, do you really think all those community groups that we saw today, the Greeks and the Italians and all the Asian cultures and stuff, they've got in their head that they deserve to parade on that day. And I don't think the Victorian government will ever all of a sudden change that just to appease Aboriginals, because if they do that, they're going to disappoint all these ethnic groups who want to parade on that day. And a lot of ethnic groups, and coming from a Greek background, I can speak, on behalf of the Greek community. A lot of ethnic groups want to show that they're part of the country. And if they're all of a sudden told that, oh, you can't parade on this day because of whatever, that's going to disappoint a lot of ethnics. So a lot of these Aboriginals and lefties who want to change the date, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they're siding with the Aboriginals, or some of them, but they're also basically destroying a very multicultural event, which is the Australia Day Parade, because a lot of these people that participate in the parade are obviously from ethnic backgrounds.
I love it when the PC card deck works against it. Works against itself.
Sounds like your dog's barking in the background there, mate.
Mm. Yeah, my dog's gone crazy. I think he might have seen some news footage of the Aboriginals and he's angry about what they did.
Okay, can I have a go at just a bit of a thought experiment? I've been trying to write an article on this I've had the idea for several months. And I've been trying to write it for about a week, but nothing's coming out. So I want to bounce it off you guys. So when you look at someone like Genghis Khan, in Mongolia, like he's revered, like the statues all over the place. I went to Paris. I went to the Palace of Versailles, and one of the biggest rooms there, it was massive. Like it would have been the size of a football field. Down one side, there were massive paintings of all these famous French victories. Like the earliest one was the battle where Charles Martel pushed back the Islamic hordes just 100 miles out from Paris. And then like it goes through all these great victories. Like I've stopped making jokes about French tanks since seeing this amazing room. And then down one entire side of this wall was all of Napoleon's victories. And I think the last one might have been Napoleon and his troops trudging back from Russia. So Napoleon was a guy who literally conquered pretty much the whole of Europe 200 years ago, around about the same time that Australia is being settled. He only got pushed back on the gates of Russia, on the gates of from Moscow, basically. And then you think of, say, the Turks. I don't see the Turks going back anytime soon, apologizing for their past aggressions and going back to Central Asia from whence they came. So you have, and you go to museums all through Europe and you see busts of Julius Caesar, like from that time. And these things are revered, like they're 2,000 years old. They're amazing. You have cultures all over the world who revere their heroes and revere their heroes who conquered other people. And they don't apologize for it. Julius Caesar killed 1 million Gauls just in his conquest of Gaul. He's this amazing.
Is that many? I thought it was just a few 100,000.
It was 1 million.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, especially in those days.
Yeah.
He wiped out a good fifth of the population. One of the mind tricks that we've been lured into is to think of our coming to Australia as a settlement. We justify it on the grounds that, hey, we gave you guys shoes, we gave you civilization. Look at all the benefits of it. We say, oh, well, like you're making really great points about the massacres that Aboriginals committed against Australians. Yes, it was a war and we won. And then we settled it and we made it a great place. Before here, there was nothing. Look at the great place that we've created. Look, we're a great place where all these people can come and work really hard and create a good life for themselves. And we're a democracy. We're one of the strongest democracies in the world. We're trying to justify it. That lures us into the trap of always having to give it away, because they're always going to be able to bring up the fact that, yes, some violence was committed in coming here. How about, and this may be the way that it ends up going, because like if the activists, the communist activists always keep pushing us, we're going to end up here. We're just going to end up revering the men who came here and tamed Australia and made a civilization. We're going to revere them as conquerors. And we're going to see ourselves as the rightful heirs of conquerors. And we're going to see Australia. We're going to see Australia Day as Invasion Day. And we're going to be proud of it. That it could be the ultimate weapon against all this, to say, do you know what? Yes, it was an invasion. We don't care. You are actually lucky that our forefathers took mercy on you and didn't wipe you out. Well, like our mercy actually spared them. It prolonged their the Aboriginal suffering in the end. That's the argument that I make.
Look, that's a good argument, but I think we'd be careful because I understand where you're coming from, and I think I kind of agree that might is right, especially in this context, that we shouldn't even apologise for anything. But at the same time, we do have the law on our side in terms of the definition of invasion. Now, I just happened to upload a video this morning, actually, not from me, but from someone that I know is in the nationalist movement. He basically did a whole video about why, technically speaking, Australia wasn't invaded, according to law. And apparently Marbo in 1992 found that Australia was settled, not invaded. So on the one hand, I like the mentality of, might is right. We came here, we could have done a lot, killed you all, but we didn't. And on top of that, we've made reparations to a certain extent. I understand that mentality and I agree with it, but at the same time, we shouldn't say, oh, we invaded. I think we should not ever admit that, because technically speaking, it was an invasion. And I'm not going to go through it now, but definitely check out the video on my channel. Australia Day wasn't invaded. Australia invaded? I uploaded this morning. It basically goes through the laws of the time and everything, explains it very well. So I think that we should be very careful when admitting certain things. We shouldn't admit that. Yeah.
It's those really important arguments, which is why I think it's going to take me a long time to actually put this down in writing. Can I put one other argument then? Because this is still something that I'm working through.
Yeah, go for it.
So you can see the Aboriginals as a conquered people, in that they've had their land taken, their culture has been suffering for a long time, and you can see the patterns of abuse and violence, domestic violence in the Aboriginal communities as a result of the fact that they have lost their nation, basically. And one of the reasons I make the argument that we should actually be proud of our conquerors is that we as white people are now becoming a conquered people, because you see the same social ills spreading through the European community, like whether it's drug abuse, depression and suicide. They all stem from the fact that we've been made to hate ourselves, and we've been made to feel ashamed of ourselves. So on the plus side, if we think of ourselves as conquerors and are proud of that, then that can counter that. The downside of that, and the logical extension of that, is that the Aboriginal people will never actually be able to deal with their social ills until they rise up and conquer us.
Yes.
So it's like it actually, the logical extension of my thinking is that the only solution to Australia is to split it up between Australians and Aboriginals.
Well, I think they're definitely a separate nation, and I've done plenty of videos about this where I mention it. The Aboriginal are definitely a separate nation to Australia. They've got their own flag, their own languages, their own customs, and I'm all for that to a certain extent, as long as those customs and traditions are in line with Australian law. I don't think that actually spearing people is a form of tribal punishment or, general female mutilation. I think, we have to intervene in some of these things, and we have in the past. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. For example, the dugongs and the turtle hunting in Aboriginal communities, they're allowed to do that still, and basically torture these poor dugongs and turtles, and the government unfortunately isn't allowed to intervene, because they've been doing it for thousands of years, and that's the way that's their their way of life. And there has been some clashes in the past where left-wing activists have gone to try and save these turtles and dugongs, and then the Aboriginals are saying, oh, but we've been here for thousands of years, this is how we do things. So the point I'm trying to make, Matty, is that they're definitely their own nation, and I think that they should maintain themselves just as we should maintain ourselves. And I really don't think, I really don't think that, and I mentioned this in one of my videos recently, I don't see how any self-respecting Aboriginal can celebrate Australia Day. I mean, it's just mind-boggling how some of these people would do that. Now, obviously, there's some Aboriginals that do,
well, don't forget, a lot of Aboriginals, a lot of them actually have European heritage as well. A lot of them are mostly European, so that's they should be able to celebrate.
Oh, that's fine. If they are
Australia Day, and they should be able to celebrate other days as well, their own public holidays.
I'm not saying if they are European, then fair enough, they can celebrate it. But I'm talking about the 10 embassy fanatics, the pure bloods, or the 70% Aboriginals, what do you want to call them. I don't blame them for doing what they're doing. I just don't like how they're, getting welfare at the same time. That's my issue. And they call themselves Australian. They've got Australian citizenship.
They should
complain about Australia Day.
That's part of that's part of the weaponization of this. So, like the Marxists, the cultural Marxists, are using the Aboriginals as weapons against us, and so that our guilt has been weaponized to hand over wealth to people who we see as victims, basically. Yeah.
And that's something that I agree with as well. Sure, they should have their own nations, and they can. I believe they should have their own territories and all that kind of thing. But we shouldn't be obliged to give them any welfare whatsoever. We can trade if they have things to trade and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if they want self-determination, I'm all for that. Just don't put a gun to my head and say you have to pay for it, because I won't pay for it. I refuse to do that without being forced. And this is what we have right now, is our own government forcing us to pay for their welfare, which is actually ultimately very bad for their communities. It promotes rampant alcoholism, other substance abuse, and worse kind of abuses. I've spoken about it in my video on the Solar generation.
Here's the thing as well, like if Aboriginals do get their own ethno-state within Australia, it might actually be bad for them if they just get given it. They might it might actually be better for them if they have to fight for a little bit.
A little bit. Well, I don't.
Again, this is my fear. Like I'm talking about logical extensions of my argument. These are my fears about what I see for Australia's future.
Well, they don't have any incentive to do that at the moment because they're giving them welfare. They're being handed they're getting handed so many resources from the white man.
They don't have enough educated people. I mean, there's not enough educated people for them to form their own state. I mean, they need to have their own teachers, their own everything. I just don't see it happening. And I see the argument for a treaty and for self-determination, but I just think it's practically impossible. And I think that if it was going to happen, it should have happened potentially back then. I just don't see it happening now. And I wouldn't support it now, only because it's not only impractical, but I just think that it's just one of those stepping stones that, we apologised in 2008. Now they want a voice in Parliament, the third chamber. They want reparations. They want a treaty. They want something. It's one of those things that they just keep on asking. And even if we did that, it would just embolden them more to ask for more. So I just think that we just need to put a line in the sand. They can complain all they want. Let them have their freaking rallies, and whatnot. But I just think we should just stop giving concessions. But in spirit, I understand the logic of that. But I just think the reality is that they can't govern themselves. It sounds like a good idea.
We're having the wrong conversation. I mean, it's right to discuss it, I guess, and it's something that we should discuss, and it should be on the table. I don't think that they'd ever actually go for it because I don't think they're serious when they talk about self-determination. I think it's just something that they're using to guilt us into giving them more taxpayer money.
For starters, we would build a wall. We'd build refugee camps all
exactly. We'd build a wall. They're not serious. We're serious when it comes to talking about setting up our own ethno-states. This is why they're so against it, and why they get so upset, why communists get so upset when we actually discuss it and we propose it as an idea. Ultimately, the battle is between communism and reality, communism and the meritocracy and individual liberty and property rights and ethnic in-group preference and nationalism and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So rather than discussing self-determination for Aborigines, which is fine that we should be talking about, it is something to talk about, but the main thing we need to talk about is how we separate from the left. Something that a YouTuber I've spoken about already, John Mark, talks about is the actual ultimate separation. In America, he advocates for the peaceful separation of left and right, which is ultimately a separation of white and non-white.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not quite at that point, I don't think, yet in Australia. I think Australia is more nuanced, but it would be good to... The problem with Australia is our governments flat out refuse to take polling data based on ethnicity. They'll do it by country of birth.
Yeah.
But not ethnicity. They should really start doing it by ethnicity so we can actually get a real understanding of what's going on in the country. But I think we need to be talking about what we do to separate the left and the right, because the left are ultimately, at this point, parasiting off the productive members of society, which is the right. They're just parasites. So we need to actually work out a way to remove the parasites from our system once and for all. And it's very, very tough to do that. If we can't be bogged down with discussions about self-determination for certain ethnic groups without actually discussing the whole bigger picture of how do we get rid of the leftist brain virus that is infecting our country that we got first-hand experience of today.
It's kind of similar. It reminds me of what's happening in the US historically. Like right now in Texas, there's an online petition. It's been there for a while. And a lot of southern states want to secede from the United States of America. And no one would support that. And it comes from, civil war, basically. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the Confederates lost that war. And basically, in a political sense, a lot of Southerners want a political divorce. It's not so much racial, because there are a lot of blacks in the South. It's more just the way the Yankees operate and the whole Washington thing, the Washington dogma. They don't understand the more rural mentality of the South, and a lot of the laws that are passed, go against their interests. And right now, there's a lot of Southerners, when polled, a lot of people in the South who literally want to secede. They just say, we want to secede because this whole experiment is not working. And maybe that could happen in Australia in the future, depending on how things go. I would like it to happen on racial terms. I agree with you. But it might even become, to a certain extent, political, because you might get to a point where all these migrants vote left, and the true fair dinkum Aussie who's maintained a level of pride in themselves, want to form their own, mini state in Riverina or something, or somewhere where there's like a high population of white people in country areas, and they can just govern themselves to a certain extent. And I honestly think that might happen in the future, because it's just really sad what's happening. Like, I just see the whole African crime thing and the amount of Asianization, and if the white nationalist mentality maintains itself in higher numbers, I think you might get people who just literally move to certain areas and then eventually just say, yep, we want to govern ourselves. There might have to be a court case to settle this. I don't know, but it might actually happen in the future.
I don't think a court case would be all that productive at this point. We've already seen that the High Court of Australia doesn't care all that much for the Constitution of Australia. Ultimately, secession, if it was to happen, just theoretically, you basically need to be able to repel any outside force. Because, like you said, if you believe might is right, I don't believe that might is right as in it's morally right, but might ultimately determines how it's practical, how it works, or how things are going to be in that particular area. So just theoretically, you could go, if you had enough people, just go to Tasmania and say, we are going to govern ourselves from now on, and there's nothing you can do about it. If they were sufficiently capable of applying enough force against any invasion, then there is literally nothing that anyone can do about it. And that's is the reality of the situation. I'm not saying that we should do that. I'm just saying that is how power actually works. Like, that's how the state ultimately works. They have all the guns. We don't have, and they have all the force. Like, they are the ones who apply all the force in a society, and they have the monopoly on that force. And people who want to get away from that need to then apply an equal or greater amount of force or in defense of themselves in order to set up their own determining state without if they are doing it without the consent of the original governing body.
Well, Sydney and Melbourne may well become like Indian or Chinese city-states, kind of like Singapore. Is basically a Chinese city-state. Well,
so Singapore is 75% Chinese, and I believe they actually have policies to keep it as a Chinese supermajority of at least 70 to 75%.
And Singapore is a long way from China, so there is actually a historical precedent for this. Look, if things go in Australia the way that they are, if the trends continue unabated, it could very well happen with Melbourne and Sydney. And I don't know, like, if a lot of lefty Aussies want to stay in Melbourne and Sydney so that they can appreciate multiculturalism, that may actually be better for the rest of Australia.
And the carjackings and everything. But
it's interesting because we do focus on the Islamic terror and the African gangs violence. But long term, like, that's the way that Sydney and Melbourne are going. They're going to be Indian or Chinese. And are we prepared to let go of the two most beautiful jewels in Australia? Our two biggest cities, our two greatest cities, to save Australia. Like cutting off a little bit of cancer. I don't know. Like that seems pretty sad to me.
It's something that we should think about and look at. What gives me hope is that a lot of them aren't actually citizens yet, and the number of citizenships granted in the last couple of years, I think, has dropped quite a bit. It's a tough situation. It's such a tough situation that we've been put into against our will, and it's so disappointing that our elites have led us to this situation.
Do you know what's interesting is that I'm going to upload a video in the next week or two about Gough Whitlam. Now, obviously, Gough Whitlam was one of the worst prime ministers we've ever had, but I basically put it in context. He wasn't as bad as people think. He actually
wasn't as bad as the guy who came before him, yeah?
Before and after as well, especially before. But it was Harold Holt who destroyed the White Australia policy effectively. And the point is that Gough did two things that I think were fantastic. The first one was that he literally lowered immigration to 50,000 people a year. What kind of prime minister would do that today? He drastically changed immigration in Australia. He might have dissolved the White Australia policy, which is ridiculous, but at the same time, he lowered immigration. That's something that today's elites wouldn't think about doing, to that extent. Obviously, they just to buy some votes, they want to live.
Even though 7 out of 10 people say that Australia doesn't need anyone else.
Exactly.
7 out of 10 people want Australia's borders to be basically shut, but our major parties flat out refuse to do it. I can't fathom how any of these ruling class fools could think that that's a sustainable political position. The vast majority of people think that there are too many people in this country and want it stopped, and only a very small minority don't. Yet they continue on course, and then these same fools and their useful idiots in the media turn around and say, "Well, why are all these minor parties joining? We've got to stop the political division." It's like, well, you've got a ruling elite that are literally acting against the interests of the body politic, like directly against our interests and what we want. Of course, you're going to get a lot of division. And it's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate that a lot of people are going over to Labor at the moment rather than taking too many people are going to Labor instead of saying no, Labor are just as bad and putting their votes with a minor party. I wish 10% of people who have gone, the 10% of people who have gone from Liberal to Labor would just go from Liberal to other, because if they went from Liberal to other, then it would be that would continue to send the message that the two major parties or the three major parties, including the Greens, are not speaking for the majority of the Australian people. There are people who vote for them just out of habit, and I think a lot of people, like most people, just vote for them out of habit or because it's their side or their team or whatever, and it's like football to them. But they continually ignore the roughly 15 to 17% or whatever it was in the last few polls of people who just say, no, we don't want any of the major parties. And like 8 or 9% of those are going to One Nation, who are probably going to win a number of seats. And then the rest are going to all these other minor parties. I mean, Tasmania's got like, I think 8 or 9 independents in their lower house. Victoria has a similar amount of minor parties in their lower house. It's not unheard of. And this is it's not, I was going to say it's unheard of, but it's not unheard of. The last time it happened was around the 1940s when Robert Menzies set up the Liberal Party. Robert Menzies, a man who was a strong supporter of the White Australia policy. And if you haven't seen my latest video, The Truth About the White Australia Policy, please go check it out. It is on this channel now after the live stream, obviously.
Awesome. Well, that's the thing. On that, majority of people also want something to be done about housing prices. And on that point, with Gough Whitlam, he actually did something about that. I forgot exactly how he did it, but he essentially formed some sort of body. It's in when I upload the video, check it out, and I named the organisation that he formed. But basically, that organisation was meant to regulate housing prices by making sure not too many houses were built or something in certain areas. That way, it could keep up with inflation or whatever. So he basically
there was the urban boundaries. They put a lot of urban boundaries in the early 90s. I actually remember when I was at school and I came back from Hong Kong here in grade 6, they were talking about urban sprawl a lot. It was a massive thing about urban sprawl in sort of the mid-90s.
They seem to have forgotten.
And they were talking about, oh, we've just got to make an urban boundary and stop people from building out and all that kind of thing. But what these urban boundaries have ultimately done, coupled with the fact that credit is so easy to get, and you can get a huge loan for very little cost in the short term. It costs you a lot in the long run. You know, you can borrow $500,000 to $1 million just like that. If you can cover the payments, then they'll give you a loan. Coupled with the urban boundaries, it all jacks up housing prices.
Yeah.
And because houses and land are financial assets as well, it ends up being that Ponzi bubble where, you know, you buy a property and then demand goes up, someone else buys a property. So, oh, wow, they're buying properties and prices are going up. So they buy a property and bid the price up, and they keep bidding it up and up and up and up and up until what we're seeing probably right now, prices collapse. And they have collapsed like over 10 to 15% in the last year or so.
This year will definitely collapse even more. But
and watch, I can't see the prices of housing leveling out or going back up. Just wait. If they keep going, if they drop another 10, 15, 20%, we might start seeing banks panicking, because residential housing especially makes up a huge proportion of the bank's balance sheets. So if residential housing were to collapse in value, then that would mean a lot of the equity of the banks would collapse in value as well. They'd lose a lot of the equity on these loans. And if they were to ever foreclose on these houses, then they wouldn't be able to recoup the costs. The thing that's different about Australia compared to America is that in America, people could just say, here's the keys back, I don't want the house anymore, and walk off. You can't do that in Australia. It's a lot harder to default and go bankrupt on a loan. And it's a lot more painful as well. You still have to pay all the money back ultimately, or as much as you possibly can, and you have bankruptcy for 7 years, and then I'm not 100% on exactly how it's harder or the exact details of it, but after working in the finance industry for so long, I can tell you that bankruptcy is a big thing in Australia. It makes it almost impossible to borrow money anywhere, and it makes it very difficult to do a lot of things, bankruptcy in Australia. And you can't just hand the key. You can't just go back to your bank and say, here's the keys, I'm leaving. No, you still have to pay the money back. Like, you still have that loan. That's still money that you've got to pay back, and they'll recover the costs. But if they can't recover the costs, you are still on the line for the rest of that money. And they put you into debt, like they put you into a debt repayment system, where they'll take the money out of your savings directly and they'll pay off their loan. And there's a lot of things that'll happen. So my point being, I don't think we're going to see as such a dramatic collapse or so sudden, but we are going to see a number of panic articles coming out from banks, or panic statements from financial experts and banks, if the financial melt of the housing market does continue as it's going.
Yeah. I got to go, guys. I actually got to go to a barbecue in about 20 minutes. But thanks for the invite. Hope the rest of the stream goes well. And
no worries. We'll probably wrap it up soon anyway. We'll be going for almost an hour, over an hour now. Actually.
All the best with the rest of the day. Happy Australia Day to all the viewers.
You too, mate. Very happy Australia Day. Good to see you once again.
Yep.
I will probably feature you in the vlog of it. I thought it was going to be a short vlog, but because of the angry protesters and the conflict and all that kind of stuff, I think it might go a little bit longer. Maybe I'm going to try and keep it under 20 minutes this time.
Awesome.
But thanks again for joining us, mate.
No worries,
man. Thanks for telling us the stories, all that kind of thing. Great chats. Have a good one if you're going now.
No worries, mate. See you later. God bless.
Next time, Eddie.
Bye.
Cheers. Cheers. So I might bring this up next time we have Maddie on. Oh, yeah.
We are no longer Bud Brothers, everyone.
No longer
the Buds are gone.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear Maddie's take on this, because he's bringing up Gough Whitlam. A really interesting thing about Gough Whitlam was after the Vietnam War, when all the Vietnamese refugees were coming to Australia. It was one of the first articles I wrote for the XYZ. And it was based on a big article in the Quadrant magazine. I can't quite remember who wrote it. HPB Colbatch, I think it was him. It was a really interesting article about how Gough Whitlam and then the entire Labour Party and then the entire union movement was dead against South Vietnamese refugees coming to Australia.
Yeah.
Gough Whitlam is actually quoted as saying, "I will not have those effing Vietnamese bolts come to this country." He was referencing the fact that the Soviet Union had problems with their in the Baltic region with the Lithuanians and Estonians and all that sort of stuff.
Careful with the words on the stream as well. With the way that it should be fine. But you got to be careful with the way you refer to certain nations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you were quoting, so it's okay.
That's what
it can be a pain. Yeah.
And so then you saw like Australian Union papers and Labor Party papers referring to the South Vietnamese as being drug dealers and prostitutes and pimps. So in the article that written by Colbatch,
yet they opened the borders.
Well, yeah, it refers to the way that they referenced them as being some of the akin to the White Australia policy in the language that they used.
But they ended it. They which is just so bizarre to me.
It's really weird.
I'm going to say this from Scott Rousel because he was so generous with the super chat before, but we didn't read it out, so I'm going to read this out. Remember, guys, the most important part of the loan is the interest. Be sure to pay back all of the interest.
Yeah, that's how they get it.
I thought I'd read that out because I felt a little bit bad that we didn't read out the whole one. My
redacted was brilliant.
I know it was good. I mean, he did get extra attention on it as well. I do want to read out every super chat if we get them. It's just I also want to keep my channel.
Absolutely. So with Gough Whitlam, it was a policy based on ideology. Gough Whitlam was basically a communist. He was taking the communist side. Yeah. But it ended up being against a certain ethnic group. It's amazing. And I still don't know where to go with that.
I don't know. But anyway, that was a good live stream. Thank you so much for joining us, chat. Hope you really enjoyed it. Don't forget to go and check out the other video that I made, The Truth and History of the White Australia Policy. It's the latest video that I uploaded other than this wonderful live stream. Also, check out our Monday Night Live XYZ. We do all the weekly headlines that we want to talk about. We talk about all the things.
So we're probably going to talk about the Covington.
We'll probably talk about, I think we'll talk about Covington. We might talk about the It's Okay to Be White banner at the cricket. We haven't actually decided on we usually shortlist topics and then decide which ones we want to talk about on the day.
Maybe a bit of Australia Day fallout as well.
Maybe a bit of Australia Day fallout.
We're going to have to watch the news.
We'll have to see how everything goes. Also, if you could just like the stream, that really, really helps us out. Dislike it if you hated it. Not going to force you to like it if you didn't like it. But yeah, if you want to like it. Also, share my channel. Tell people about the channel. Tell people about XYZ, the newspaper / magazine / website / vlog / blog / nationalist activist website, whatever you want to call it. Check it out. Link in the description to that. Thank you again for joining us. Dave, do you want to say one more thing before we go?
Yeah. We've asked for half of the ABC's budget. We asked the Australian government. We're still waiting.
We are waiting for the other half of the Australian.
I promise that
budget
I won't
for the ABC.
use that $500 million to play poker and go to strippers.
I promise I won't buy a helicopter with it.
Oh no! It'll go to. It's the helicopter fund. We'll have a fleet.
We're gonna have a few. We're gonna have to. Well, I was being insincere.
Yeah.
We'll definitely buy a number of helicopters.
Fleet of helicopters, and
we promise it will go to good use,
and we will. Tanks with flamethrowers.
Well, if the government actually wants to use that budget to get some balance in the media, then we will take that money and produce the best possible content we can.
Be just as balanced as the ABC.
Just as balanced as the ABC, and that is a promise. Anyway, guys, thanks very much again for watching, and we'll see ya when we see ya.
Cheerio, everybody. Thanks.